Well, thank you so much, Vincente. I want to begin, as soon as I get my PowerPoint, my slides here, by first thanking the Rafael del Pino Fundación and Vincente in particular, and Macarena, who has helped me today, for inviting me to be here with you today. I'm really quite honored to have the opportunity to share some of my academic expedition with you and some of the things I've learned and discovered and some of the things I believe lie ahead. Most importantly, I'm very eager to hear from you and to understand the way you think about education and the challenges you see and the things that you would tell me I should perhaps consider doing. So let me just get this going here. So thank you once again very much for inviting me to be here tonight. So I'm going to tell you a little bit of my story so that I can make the case for the premise that I want to share with you, which is that we need a pipeline of education in order to produce the students that our workforce and our society needs for the future, and that our students and our educators and our system needs to be entrepreneurial in its approach to doing this work. And by entrepreneurial, I want to first be very careful to suggest that it's not that I think that we all must be or teach our students to go out and make lots and lots of money like Mark Zuckerberg with Facebook or anything of that sort of thing. That's not my objective, but rather to take a page from the entrepreneur's playbook which suggests that the entrepreneur seeks to look where the challenges in front of us are and sees in those challenges opportunities to make a difference, to solve a problem, to serve, and to create something new. And so I think it's that act of creation and the challenge of facing a problem that's critically important to all of us right now. It's the way the workforce behaves and the way we must prepare not only our young people, but all of us to behave in the world of the future. So first, let me make the proposition that the future of work will not look like the past. And I'll have a little bit more to say about that as I go on through my talk. This has been very true for generations, right? Probably our grandparents said, whoa, my children faced a workplace that didn't quite look like mine. And certainly my children face a workplace that doesn't look exactly the way the workplace looked when I entered it. Nonetheless, I want to make the case that the pace of this evolving change has really accelerated. And I think we can probably all feel that. The pace of change has accelerated extraordinarily. The phones that we carry with us today can do more things for us than ever any device has been able to do. They take the map out of the glove compartment for us so that we can find our way. They take pictures for us. They transport messages in text, and they bring us new knowledge, among so many other things. They give us the ability to have someone come in an Uber car to pick us up instantly. All of these things are all new in just the past 10 years. Imagine, I used to say to my children in the 1980s, oh, imagine what life was like for poor me when I was little and I had only a black and white television. They couldn't understand how that could be so. And that was the 1980s, but subsequent to that, the change that my children have witnessed and that we have witnessed with these new generations has been a very, very rapidly evolving set of changes. So I believe that educators need to be able to work with this kind of change. I mean, in fact, though I'm an English major and I love the language, I don't own a dictionary anymore. I put it on a bookshelf someplace in the office for anybody who wants to blow the dust off of it and use it, because we don't need such tools anymore, right? And we need to be able to work with the tools we have in front of us. But we need to be entrepreneurial in how we figure out what these challenges are. Not afraid, but rather eager to go forward and meet the challenge. And we need to enable our children and to inspire our learners to be entrepreneurs, people who learn in order to achieve goals that they set for themselves, who are intentional and inspired about this effort because they're driven to solve a very important problem, the problem of inventing me. This is the problem that our students need to face. How do I invent myself? And then later, How do I reinvent myself and continue to evolve as an invention, as a being that strives to be happy in the world and to serve? The system of education need to create connectivity, this pipeline I speak of, that's real and that enables a progression of access so that the knowledge that the learner needs, he or she is able to find and understand. I think right now we have a big gap, like the Grand Canyon, in between secondary education and higher education, and we have a similar gap in between higher education and the workplace. And so I'll talk more about that in a few moments. I think we need to create access. We need to give the opportunity to more people, and it's more than bringing people into the traditional places like this one in order to enable them to learn. There are many, many millions of people who will never see the beautiful city of Madrid or Providence, Rhode Island, who don't have the opportunity to sit in a room like this one and don't have the ability to learn from some of our great educators. We need to break down the barriers of time and place in order to give access to those people and make the world a better place. The use of technology is key, but it does not replace learning in the classroom. Rather, I believe that it is not an either or, it's an and proposition. The classroom, however, should change. It should not look like the classroom of the past. No longer should we sneeze from the dust of chalk coming from a chalkboard. And finally, education must be an open and continuous pipeline, not confined to a certain period in our life, but responsive to the need that we all feel to continue to learn, to reinvent ourselves, and to have the ability to contribute to a workplace, to our communities, and to society and a global world. So, let me tell you a little bit of my story. My expedition, as I said a moment ago, as an educator and a seeker of knowledge. And then perhaps you'll see why it is that I'm so passionate about this work that I do, and also feel with me what my students have been saying to me for the past couple of days. And these are my mid-career professional students, so looking out at that audience looked very much like looking at the audience sitting in the room here today. Not young people with backpacks, professionals who are eager to pursue additional education. These students, when we ask them, well, why do you come in the middle of your life to a program that disrupts, puts you into a marathon of learning while still you're managing your workplace environment and keeping up with that and managing your family, and maybe you stop doing some things like you can't watch television for a few months or something like that. But why do you come to this? And they said, I need to disrupt myself. I need to make myself feel uncomfortable and get out of this space that I've grown into, because I know that to stay comfortable and stand still will not serve me well. It will not serve my employer, my organization well, and it's not what the future is about. So I myself, I said I would tell you a little bit of my story. I promise not to go on too long. I am a perpetual seeker of knowledge and lover of learning. As a child, I found the fattest books I could find, and I read all the time. Bothered my brothers because I wouldn't speak to them when we were riding in the car. I'm nose into the book. And I discovered early that disrupting what was familiar and exploring the unknown is exciting, and it's what leads to greater abilities, confidence, and happiness. I grew up in a very, very small town. Maybe 5,000 people lived in this little town. And I went to a little school where 5 towns sent their children to the school. When I graduated from these small schools, actually the very first school I went to was a literal one-room schoolhouse. One-room schoolhouse. It was idyllic, an apple tree in the yard and a swing for first graders and sheep in the field next to us, right? When I graduated from high school, there were only 84 people in my graduating class. It was a beautiful community, a wonderful place to grow up. But I chose to leave. Being a seeker of knowledge and someone who knew that I needed to disrupt myself, I chose to leave for college, and quite bravely, my peers thought, decided to attend the University of Massachusetts, as Vincente said. Well, I came from this little town, remember? 5,000 people. The University of Massachusetts had 20,000 undergraduates, and it was in a place where there were 5 other colleges, smaller colleges, but there were thousands and thousands of college students and faculty and all sorts of other people. That was, for me, quite a disruptive new city, essentially, to enter. But it was the thing that made me uncomfortable and made me know that I needed to seek knowledge and learn and evolve and change myself, change the way I did things, and learn to be smarter and responsive to my environment, right? Which is what I'm suggesting all of our students need to do all through their lives. So it was almost like traveling abroad for me. The place was so different. Initially very uncomfortable, but soon it grew to be a circumstance that I really appreciated and that excited me greatly as I sought new knowledge and new growth. And it created confidence that I could do other things with my life. So some would say that we need to study a subject directly aimed at our work aspirations, and this is what we too often, I think, tell our children. What will you do for work? That's what you should study. And that is really not true any longer, because the thing that you think you'll do for work will not be the thing that will be available to you in the future. Things will change rapidly, and I'll have some more data on that in a couple of minutes. And it's also difficult when you're young, when you're 18, 16, 18, 20, early 20s. Very difficult to know what your passion is and what you're good at and where you should go in your life. And so it's important to experiment. So I studied English literature and history and cultures because those were the things that I felt the passion for and that I wanted to learn. I didn't know where that would take me. Perhaps I would be a teacher. Perhaps I would be a journalist or a lawyer. I didn't know. But having the opportunity to see more of the world, to understand places like the Caribbean, the history of the Caribbean, or to learn the literature of Europe and read Don Quixote, for example. These were things that made my world larger and made me yet more curious. And because I learned that I could do these things in the same way that my peers did them, I grew the confidence that I could discover where to go and what to do. When I chose a term of study abroad at the Oxford University, my world awareness and inspiration to encounter the discomfort of a new place was again reinforced. I was a child who had never traveled outside of the United States. The furthest I had been was to visit my grandparents in Florida. A very long drive, by the way, back in that time, but nothing like what I learned to experience in Oxford, and that I've been so fortunate to experience more of now that I'm an adult who can travel even more. All along, I worked in jobs that paid bills, but clearly did not suggest that they would be satisfying for a life of good quality. I worked in food service and retail, and at a vacation resort I taught people how to ride horses and such things. Again, a lovely thing to do, but not what would take me to the future or the sort of thing really that most of us aspire to. I decided against studying law and did not get into the journalism program that I wanted to go to, and then I discovered that I could take a degree in teaching at Brown University, a master's degree, that I could try that profession of teaching, and off I went, certainly, to teach English in a high school classroom, an aspiration that I feel is a dedication of joy and a dedication of importance to the future, and I truly loved those students and the opportunity they gave me. But we can't choose moments of disruption, they come to us. And so before I had finished my second year of teaching, Brown University suggested that I join the faculty and staff of the university in order to build new things and be an inventor. So I had to choose. Stay where I was comfortable or take the path of adventure. And you know I chose the path of adventure, of course. And so when I joined the university, again, I found the discomfort there because I had to learn all about a new place and new stakeholders, and I had to try to help achieve the thing that they were aspiring to do, to build something brand new, which, you know, is very difficult to do in an old institution that's rather set in its ways. And higher education is sort of set in ways that have come to us over thousands of years, my institution for 250 years. And so, joining Brown as an administrator and designer of educational experiences, I again faced the discomfort of the unfamiliar, and additionally, the challenge of creating something that did not exist except as an idea in the mind of a senior faculty member. Quickly, I discovered that such invention takes investigation and learning traditions and values of a place, finding others who have the talent to contribute, and shaping an idea into a product, not words we usually use in higher education, but a product that in this case young people and their parents would want, and really actually creating a business plan not something as an English major or an educator I ever thought I would really be doing, within an institution that I had only previously seen as a traditionally structured university, and I had to convince others that this plan had value on many levels, that it would be beneficial to many stakeholders. I did not do that alone. I did that in a team of people. It takes many, many kinds of talent and insight to build things of that sort. Since that day, I've continuously engaged in seeking out possibilities, creating responses to problems, or finding places where a new product or a new solution could serve many objectives for the people, our students, for teachers and their academic departments at my university, for the university, and to enable the impact in society through creating access to education for populations not traditionally served by higher education, and for our own higher education students during the times and in places where they don't typically study, using technology to mediate their education and helping them to go to places elsewhere in the world where they could deepen their understanding. So the first thing that we created was a pre-college program. And when we started again familiar. We created a program that was very, very unusual for my university because we were used to having only 18-year-olds join us. And we created a program for people as young as 14 and 15 and 16 to come to our college campus and understand what it would be like to be a college student, to really, for a short period of time, feel what it is to be in college. So at first the product looked exactly like the other products that we were so familiar with, a course with grades and credit, and the only difference was that we compressed it into 7 weeks and we offered it to younger people. Soon, however, we started with 99 students, and gradually we grew to maybe 200 students. That's nice, but it doesn't have very much impact. And so we thought further about the problem. What's the problem, and how would we serve more students? How do we advance education, create access, and inspire young learners? So we discovered the potential to take away the grades and create short bursts of learning explorations in subject areas that are not typically available in high schools, weren't then certainly. Engineering, medicine, creative writing, anthropology, computer science, and I could go on. Now we could enable these learners to be at college, to feel like they were adult-type learners, those people they aspired to be, for a portion of their summer, shorter portions. They could learn what they wanted to learn and expand their awareness, be inspired about their future, learn to be the young entrepreneurs, the inventors of themselves that they needed to be in order to go on and find success. This also allowed them to do other things with their summer vacations, whether that was athletics or work or family time or just to play. And it enabled us, very importantly, to grow from maybe 200 students to now over 6,000 students who come every summer to us from all over the world, at least 80 different countries, all of the states in the United States. Students of all ages and abilities, students who come because their parents can afford to send them, and students who can't afford that, and who come because good organizations around the United States and in the world send us children like a young woman from Afghanistan and young people from a very challenging area near San Francisco or from Harlem in New York City. We partner with these organizations and in fact give scholarships ourselves so that we ensure that the experience these young people have is an experience of the world. Again, an opportunity to disrupt their comfort, to make them be in a place unlike one that they've ever been before, with people they don't know or understand, to be discomforted, but to learn and to be inspired and to be challenged to go on. We also help students by giving them study abroad opportunities and really fostering the kind of learning environment that enables them to know each other. And so then I get letters back from them talking to me about how inspired they've become and how they've changed their thoughts about who they might be in the future and how they might pursue their studies. It's an extremely rewarding thing to do. And I wish that more students this age could come. We're beginning to explore the use of technology-mediated education for these students, and we will pursue more of that because that indeed will create access to students, whether they're here in Madrid or on the other side of the world. Students who perhaps don't have the resources to travel to be with me in beautiful Providence, Rhode Island, or students who don't have the time or can't break away from their families or are working, can receive technology-mediated education to go on with their learning. Eventually, as I did my career at Brown, I also decided to take another very uncomfortable step in many ways and pursue my doctorate at the University of Pennsylvania. A very significant challenge, as any of you know who have studied deeply and written a dissertation and been challenged by faculty. That was certainly a disruptive experience for me, and one that I value deeply, because as soon as I got past the anxiety of disruption, I understood how wonderful the opportunity for my learning would be. And then, as I continued on with my work at Brown, a disruptor named Arpad van Lazar, who some of you may know, invited me and others from Brown University to come here to Madrid and meet with people at the IE Business School. This was very unusual for us. My university is old and known for liberal arts. We don't have a business school, and it had never occurred to us to have a partner. I say that it took us, of our 250-some years of life on this earth, it took us about 245 to create a partnership with Rhode Island School of Design, the buildings of which run right up against the buildings of our university. And so here we were in Madrid, thinking about partnering with a young upstart school, 30 or so, 35 years old, that taught business, not something we knew anything about. That was certainly an extremely disruptive experience. At first, it was difficult for us to even make sense of it. Arpad assured us that there was opportunity inside this amazing, confusing challenge, and I know that he was right. And a number of us collaborated together to pursue that opportunity, including disrupting the norms of my own institution quite significantly, and to create forward-thinking ideas about the use of education and the creation of what we call a blended experience of learning, which I mentioned a few minutes ago when I referenced those mid-career professionals. So now you can see that my pipeline of passion for learning and my pipeline of experience starts with young children, ages as young as 12, in fact, and goes on to far older adults. I think my oldest enrolled learner has been 55, but I aspire to create a program for those even beyond that point in their careers, and folks who, as they think about pivoting into retirement, would also enjoy a new learning opportunity so that they can continue to do good work in the world. So we created what we call a blended learning environment, an instructional model that can serve people who travel to us or here to Madrid, and they come for short, intensive bursts of time, and in between those bursts of time, they learn for a couple of months in an online platform. Now, some would say an online platform is an uninviting and uninteresting place to be, but far to the contrary. What we learn when we meet our students when they arrive is that they have been working online in groups and collaborating in this social media type environment. So they've come to know each other. They know about each other's children and little pets. They know about each other's vacations and aspirations for their future. So they're already a community of learners that has been created through this online segment that's been also an inspiration because our faculty are delivering content to challenge their thinking. By the time they come to be physically together, as we are here in this room, they're passionate about their learning, and they're also passionate about collaboration, which is a key feature of the future of work. Passionate about understanding that in some cases, for example, a documentary filmmaker who comes into an MBA program and says, I don't know anything about finance, can sit next to a financier who says, but I don't know anything about design, and I need to change the way I think about my work. But together, they create something really new. So now, why do I tell about my career as an academic entrepreneur? Because I draw from my own experience, the moments when discomfort made me learn, and when opportunity inspired my engagement, and ways in which seeking out problems to solve led me to an ever-growing opportunity to make a difference and to be fulfilled from my work. This is what I think we all seek, and if we can inspire our students, they will be empowered to seek their own entrepreneurial inventions of me as well. So I think this is the challenge for education and the thing that our universities and our secondary schools need to meet. In universities and colleges, we hear all the time that our incoming students are not prepared for higher academic studies. We also hear that our graduating students are not ready for the demands of the workplace. I expect many of you have heard or even said that yourselves. In addition, we hear employers all around the world seeking new kinds of talent and the continuous evolution in their employees. They want their employees to be continuous learners. We also face a world experiencing significant population movements. I know here in Europe that's an especially present circumstance and poignant challenge. The educator's mission needs to be this: to enable all of our students to discover the knowledge needed to become confident and able to engage and to contribute in the development of themselves and in service to the world, so that they can lead lives that are useful and produce reputable results for others, whether this is a small impact or a very large societal impact. We need to help our students see their potential and the many, many opportunities the world offers. We need to present them with challenges so that they strive to learn and define their own learning paths. So this is why I think those 18-year-olds and 20-year-olds really can't be given a prescriptive path to a career that we can see for them today. That career may not be there when they finish their studies, and they are better developing the broad capacities of the inventive, curious learner, the ability to communicate and to collaborate and to be curious about all sorts of things from science to culture. This is what we need to do for our students. Then they need to continue to redefine themselves and learn throughout their lives. This is what employers tell us is critical. I understand from research done by Deloitte that the half-life of my preparation for work, probably also for many of those of you sitting here, is 30 years. And truly I've been successful learning as I did as a younger person and deploying that knowledge over 30 years, though I think I've constantly had to be engaged in invention. But now, Deloitte tells us, this is the real punch from the new Deloitte study. What used to be valuable for 30 years, they say the half-life of the education we're giving our students today will be projected to last for 5 years, only 5 years. And then if they don't begin to relearn, if they're not aware of the challenges they're facing, they'll fall behind and fall out of the capacity to be a contender in the workforce and a contender in their ability to contribute. Anyone entering the workplace today in 5 years may experience a job that changes dramatically due to the impact of things like technology, including robotics, artificial intelligence, data analytics, and social expectations and other fast-moving factors. We are living in times described by many as VUCA, V-U-C-A. VUCA stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. I think we all feel that a little bit in our daily lives. In the workplace, it's guaranteed that our students will feel volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguousness repeatedly throughout the evolution of their career. Still, this leaves students with significant challenges, and we need to meet the challenge as educators to support them, help them be ready for this VUCA world, and a life in which they must be nimble and know how to find information, keep learning and evolving, and be ready for the next challenges and opportunities. This is what the entrepreneur does, the place where I started, the page from the entrepreneur's playbook. The entrepreneur looks for these problems, seeks these solutions, and it's the mindset we need to inculcate in our students. To accomplish this, our teachers also need new skills in order to effectively serve their students. How does a teacher inspire an entrepreneur to create the best of what that individual can be? Teachers should not be charged with delivering content the way you pour oil into a vessel. They need to present challenges that lead students to hunger for learning and an inspiration to solve problems. The early 20th century educational philosopher John Dewey believed that the best learning came from meeting problems that would become ever more complex and seeking the multiple inputs of knowledge that would lead to solution. Today, this is exactly what happens in our workplaces. Assignments are not given with clear guidelines, and they are not repetitive as they once were in manufacturing. Problem solving is a key skill. And employers tell us that complex problems are best addressed by multiple talent abilities brought together in collaboration. Our students cannot be made or be enabled to be passive. They need to own the duty of inventing and reinventing themselves. The format of education similarly needs to catch up. No modern factory looks today like it did 100 years ago. But so many of our schools look exactly like they did 100 years ago. Even in leading institutions of higher education, things look very much like they did many years ago. We talk about distance education, the use of technology-mediated education, and for some time we've talked about it with disdain, as though it couldn't possibly be as good as the experience of sitting in a classroom like this together. And yet I can tell you, and I think many of you have had this experience, when you sit in a large lecture hall where 100 or 200 or in some cases 600 students are there, distance education is happening 20 rows back. And the distraction of the learner is happening, and they're not getting any personal attention, and they're not getting better education than what we can deliver when we serve them in an online platform where the lecture that I or a faculty member is giving is captured so that the student can be at home on their treadmill or in their pajamas or indeed riding the bus to work with their mobile device and listening with their headphones to that lecture. And then what can they do? They can stop the lecture when they've become distracted. Like the distance learner in the back of that classroom, they can't stop the lecture. It goes on without them, and they lose whatever content is being delivered unless the friend next to them is taking good notes. But the new learner can hear that lecture and can then play it again when they get confused by what's going on, or play it again to refresh their understanding when they've actually learned more things for which that earlier piece of learning creates some sort of insight. So we have the ability to share with the learner and empower the learner to drive their own learning. To be inspired, one hopes, by the learning, that's our challenge as well, but to drive the learning at their own pace and for their own needs, whether they're a young parent of children who needs to stop learning for a little while they take care of an infant, or an older learner in the workplace who actually needs to get their work done before they continue their learning. This way of delivering content gives the ability for students to pace things and own things themselves. Indeed, for our faculty, they tell me as well that when they teach effectively in this model, they don't give an assignment the way I might ask you a question right now, and on the spot, 1 or 2 hands would go up. And if I asked many questions, often the same 1 or 2 hands would go up, right? And many of you would remain silent. Some for very, very good reasons. You know, you're learning yourself, or you're a reflective learner who just needs a little more time to think about how to answer that question effectively. So in the online space, my faculty will tell me every learner in the room, the online room, produces some response. And they build on each other's responses, and the faculty hear from all of their learners. It's, for my faculty, an extraordinarily exciting experience when they no longer worry about the student in the back of the room who has not made a comment all semester and whether she's understanding what's going on or whether she even wants to be there, right? And so online learning can be a very, very valuable tool for the learner and for the faculty member. Let's go back to the workplace for a moment and think about the demands there. According to Nick Van Dam, who's the Global Chief Learning Officer at McKinsey, the characteristics of leaders include authenticity, inspiration, passion, flexibility, comfort with that ambiguity I mentioned, collaboration, optimism, learning, humility, and focus on mental and physical health. That's a long list of attributes, but notice that none of them are the attributes we might have ascribed to leaders 20, 30, or 50 years ago. Nowhere in this list is there a word like power, directiveness, forcefulness. Those are not the learning tools or the leader tools of today. These are more the kind of things we might call soft skills, although the president of Dartmouth University calls them the power skills. These are the skills that enable us to be those who inspire, as I hope teachers will and leaders will, those who follow. If you don't have anyone following you, you cannot be called a leader. According to the World Economic Forum, the Future of Jobs report by 2020, more than a third of the most sought-after core skill sets will consist of those that are not yet considered critical to a job today, such as persuasion, emotional intelligence, these soft skills. These include social skills, collaboration skills, communication skills. Because of the rapid pace of change across all industries, upskilling and reskilling needs to be equally adaptable, measurable, and agile. And the evolution of learning needs to change at the same pace. The highest ranking skills under leadership development's unmet needs are communication and feedback, employee engagement, organizational transformation. Pardon me. It just skipped forward on me. Leading strategically, leading high-performance teams, and leading innovation. These are the skills that are expected for the future, and these are the skills that entrepreneurs and those inspired to develop the owner, learner of themselves achieve. Corporations increasingly recognize the potential of artificial intelligence, cloud computing, big data analysis, applications in technology and robotics, augmented and virtual reality to solve complex organizational problems. There's a pressure inside organizations to develop personalized adaptive learning that recognizes and caters to learning aptitudes, preferences, performance. This brings learners to peak performance. This is what I was speaking of when I described the way in which technology-mediated online learning can serve the needs of the individual learner. It can be personalized by them. It can be adaptive to their needs, whether those are the pressures of their lives or their learning style. It can recognize and give them new aptitudes and inspire them to change their preferences or to pursue learning through the preferences and the performance that they themselves are effective at. It's expensive if we do this kind of teaching one-on-one, and it's very disruptive in the employee space if it's delivered in a class session that stops groups of workers for training sessions. So instructor-led instruction in the workplace has dropped from 47 to 41% in just the last 3 years. I expect to see that continue to drop. This kind of experience in workplace training will continue to disappear, and the delivery of content online that is inspiring to the learner will increase. Hence, corporations additionally need to have instructional designers and ways to deliver good technology, something that they did not need in the past. Technology-mediated learning that the employee can own and can gain as they evolve. So when they discover the problem, when they discover the need to know, the best time to learn is when you understand what you need to know, right? And this is why I say that in our schools, secondary and higher education, we need to help our students understand what it is they need to know and inspire them to seek that knowledge, not ask them to sit and learn by rote or memorize things that seem unimportant and disconnected to their futures. The McKinsey report most recently reported that 80% of companies recognize the need to redesign their traditional structures to create a network of experts. This is how problems will be solved in the workplace, not by individual assignments or individual talented people, but by networks of expert talent. Only 21% of these organizations say that the current talent that we are giving them from higher education meets this need, this according to Deloitte's Future of the Work report. The response to all of this challenge in the workplace must be for education to keep up and to prepare our students to be functional in these environments. We must use technology effectively in order to address cost in education, as well as to deliver education to the student where and when he or she needs it, and in a way that encourages both this face-to-face experience and online collaboration and learning. When we deliver online education to the executive mid-career students we enroll, even though they may be taking this education from a great distance, indeed they may be in cities like this one, They then find each other. They find each other online in order to collaborate and learn, and sometimes they find each other at Starbucks. So face-to-face never goes away, nor would I advocate for that to disappear. Removing the barriers of time and place in education can reduce cost for students and, importantly, open access to people who live and work far from educational institutions. In addition, I argue, we need to adopt the entrepreneur's creed of failing fast and frequently, which means to be unafraid to take risks and to discover that things often don't work as you planned. Instead, you make an attempt. It fails. You learn from this experience. You find more information. You find more talent. You find another collaborator, and you try again and again until you succeed. Schools do not reward this sort of behavior. Instead, failure means a bad grade. Failure means holding someone back or neglecting to guide them to the source of knowledge they need in order to achieve. Failure is seen as negative in our schools. It should be seen as the positive that leads our entrepreneurs to the opportunities and solutions that make a difference for the future. Perhaps more importantly, we don't yet embrace ways to inspire the learner through challenge, as John Dewey and also Ted Sizer, an important education reformer from late in the last century, taught us. Both of these fine and important philosophers of education suggested, recommended to teachers that they inspire their learners not by telling them how to solve a problem or by forcing them to take a test, but rather by offering a complex problem, offering the opportunity to work in groups, and giving them the opportunity to seek out knowledge. Life is not made in the divisions of our academic enterprises. Economics is not separated from public health, which is not separated from sociology or from writing and the humanities. The STEM fields are not separated from the needs of the human body and the human mind. And so in life, the complexities of our challenges are recognized by our experience. We must prepare our learners to be complex and broad. I can offer a small example of what I mean by describing the open curriculum at my university, at Brown University, and a few other universities in the United States ascribe to such open learning. In this environment, we do not tell the learner what kind of core requirements to take. Instead, we bring them to the campus and say, you must be the owner of the invention of you, the architect of your education. At first, as all young people do, they feel like they've arrived in an academic candy shop with all sorts of choice. They've often come from high schools, most always come from high schools, where they were told what to take, one step after the next. And they've never been free to make these kinds of choices. So of course, as our children always do, they go a little wild at first. But a little wild often means that they take psychology and engineering, that they take an art history course and an anthropology course. Or they don't go wild. They fall into a trap of saying, I'm good at math. I'll take 4 math courses. But quickly they understand that that is not the way to make the most of what feels, when you first enter a 4-year degree, like a long time, and suddenly quickly becomes something that goes by so fast. Quickly they discover that to be the architects of me, the developers of their own futures, they have to explore broadly across the curriculum. They have to learn new skills. They have to analyze, interpret, collaborate, communicate, and seek knowledge, whether that's the knowledge they gain from coming to someone like me for advice, or to an older student for advice, or the knowledge they gain from the guidance of a faculty member's lecture, or their instructions to do more learning through texts and online conversations. The learner must own the learning, must shape his or her future, inspired by direction and challenge and the opportunity to continuously learn throughout life. Now to that pipeline concept that I put into my title. There are gaps, as I mentioned earlier. Secondary to higher education, there's a gap. Higher education to the workplace, yet another gap. I believe it's incumbent upon us to resolve these through the creation of continuous feedback loops, as recommended by Clayton Christensen in his work, The Innovator's Dilemma, and many of his other works. We learn through feedback loops, again, failing fast and circling back to understand what went wrong. We learn by engaging in continuous quality improvement, in listening to what the other tells us. So for higher education, we should listen as well as tell secondary education. Secondary education should ask, as well as tell us where their challenges are, so that we can make that gap between the two experiences smaller and have fewer students fall out when that gap arrives in their life. Similarly, in higher education, we need to ask what the leaders of the workforces need, what they expect in the talent they wish to hire, and we must evolve in order to meet those needs and be responsible to our students, preparing them for the challenges of the future. Currently, we don't think about doing that. When we created our executive master's programs, in fact, I did something that our faculty at first thought was quite shocking. Instead of asking faculty, what would you like to teach? I said, no, we're going to ask the chief executive officers and others in healthcare, in hospitals, in insurance industries, in pharmaceutical companies, in biotech development and patient advocacy areas, what do your people need to know in order to be as successful as possible and transform your environments? We learned from them that it was all of these skills that I've mentioned earlier: agility, collaboration, communication, analysis. These are all the skills that a traditional liberal arts education can give you if you understand that you're inventing yourself as you go through that experience. So we came back with this information to our faculty and said, the shape of the program that will make these people successful is not the shape that you prescribe based on your knowledge, though we need your knowledge. It needs to be shaped as well by professionals in the workplace who take your theory and put it into practice. And those two things need to be closer together so that the students who finish these programs can become true leaders, true entrepreneurs, true innovators, and truly successful in serving society. In education, this means understanding what is expected at the end of the place in the pipeline where you have responsibility. We must seek information from and give information to in order to achieve the success of our own work and effectively enable our students. We must create intentional learners through our work, learners prepared to face a volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous environment, and to thrive in that environment and continuously relearn and retool themselves. I thank you very much for giving me the time to speak with you, and I'm eager to hear what you might advise me and what questions you might have.